Today we are just going to start with the introduction. And all I want to know is where you would draw your lines for the introduction. So in your groups, choose one person who's going to do the reading. And while that person reads, or you can take turns, however you want to manage it, as that person is reading, the rest of you should be figuring out where you would put your lines, and then you're going to compare where you drew the lines. Be able to explain or rationalize why you chose to draw them the way you did, so that your group can come up with a consensus.
Where it's translated into English, revealing some mentioning of 7 spirits that are very much like the description of vampires as we think of them today.
Do you think we should chunk it at this point? Do you think
As much as we can, in 10 minutes.
No, but do you think this is a particular chunk? Because this would be the intro and the, the anecdotal part. So should we chunk it at this part, or should we add to the second one?
You think the first paragraph is talking, it like goes with the second paragraph?
Because this would be the introduction paragraph, and
these two, and then you two.
Yeah, it has the leading in, and then it has the explanation of the subject.
Yeah.
Shouldn't it be around this point?
Yeah, because I think
Really?
Because after this, they start
it's
going
gonna
off into.
change.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think he's right on that.
Because like, if you look,
It's just talking about what they're gonna get into, and then just gives the description.
about it.
Yeah.
Then the second,
Like
third,
what would be the 2 paragraphs?
Yeah,
2 paragraphs?
Because the second one they cut off at they talk about a different subject. Like
For the third paragraph? So the fourth one you're talking about is different, right? When it continues over here?
so
Oh, yeah.
So we chunk.
right here? Or
Yeah. Where, Kelly said right here. Because this one's talking about that's when it starts to get into economics. While the second, third one's talking about describing them, the vampires.
How about we just put 2 and then leave this on the transition, but inside a whole chunk itself?
But the
It will make more
transition is
sense.
for the
Because
right?
that's where we start talking about Karl Marx.
Okay, so we'll draw the line there instead. So it's 1, 2, and 3 sections.
Just introduction. The main idea that most people have about a vampire. Like when you think vampire, that's what you think.
Yeah, and then the next one is the example of, like we said about Marx, and that's basically all tied together. And, yeah, like real life, like text to real life, I guess, connection, right? And then the next
And the next part
section
is just like how it relates to
is how we connect the past.
the meaning of it.
Middle group, first chunk, where'd you draw your line?
From where it ends at 1 and 4, because it's just introducing like what vampires are, how they're in like literature and like people's work. That's why. Yeah.
Okay,
Just
here.
introducing it.
Everybody agree? Yeah. All right, second chunk. Go.
So we put our second chunk right after where it says slay the vampire according to superstitious beliefs, where it starts with the vampire metaphor and economics can be found in right there. Yeah.
Tell me why.
Because that second section is basically telling you about where vampires came from, or where they allegedly believe that vampires came from, the whole vampire myth or whatever you want to call it. And then it's giving you the example after in the new chunk about Marx. So
Okay, so then how does this paragraph connect to this paragraph?
it's telling you where it came from, and then it's telling you what they did to the people back then that they believed, or what they assumed they did, so that's what we thought. I mean, we could be wrong, but that was our interpretation of it.
Okay, anybody else chunk this the same way?
We did.
Why, Jess? What was your connection between the paragraphs?
Like, because they talk about like the history of vampire and how it was spelt, but then it says like the fact of like it was the threat, because they said for Mesopotamian texts, like they said 7 spirits, which is now how we think of vampires. So they continued like the threats throughout the history.
Okay, so where in the previous paragraph do I see this idea of there being a threat?
Ancient Mesopotamian texts dating back to 4000 BC were translated into English revealing like 7 spirits,
Okay.
or what we think, much like the description of vampires as we think of them today.
Okay, much like the and how do we think of them today?
Kind of blood sucking and dark. And,
Ah, 5. Okay. Where else do I see this idea of vampires as a threat in that section?
The first sentence of the second paragraph says a description of vampires, the man's natural predator.
Okay, this is what I want you to do. 4 chunks. Chunk 1, 2, 3. I got you. This is what I want. I want both a does statement and a says statement for your chunk.
Yeah, like does it introduce, does it describe, does it?
Okay, I think it's talking about how it made its way into literature. That's what it's saying.
So describes or
It,
explains.
I'm not sure. Okay, it does like introduce. Oh, I have the paper she gave us. I think it like discusses or emphasizes. What do you think?
Vampires as well as economic significance.
Either way.
Or I think it just shows like vampires' involvement in like media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And does it say modern? Oh, mainstream. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like media. Okay, so it presents the
Vampires.
like
And its
topic.
involvement. Yeah.
Make sure tonight you look at that section so that if you have not figured it out already, when you come in tomorrow, that's where we're going to start.